So here's what we were thinking. We were thinking that you might be interested in knowing why we know Kim and Steven and why we're here and what we sort of do day to day. Is that true, or should I do something else? I have nothing else planned, so that's going to be the better option of the two. So just a little bit of street cred. We're from Boston, Massachusetts now. We had 9 feet of snow last year. I heard you had the opposite winter. Right? Yeah, lucky. But you get this, right? I'm from Ohio, and so occasionally when I come and travel this far, I just like people to know that we also suffer where we are from. Have you ever had any 9-foot winters ever? Really? Oh, you should come visit us. It's great. It's like we'll trade you places for like January, February, March. We'll take care of the farm. You can enjoy our winter. It'll be perfect. All right. So that is where we're from, and this is what the church looks like. This is probably really different too. So this was from a study that the Pew Research Center did a little while ago on Christianity in America, and this is just from 2014. So this is not a long time ago. 15. This came out this year. So in 8 years. From 2007 to 2015, where we're from, in Massachusetts, the population of people that you could walk up to on the street and say, "Hello, I'm Mark. Do you believe anything? Do you go to a church?" and would say, "Yes, I'm a Christian," dropped from 72% to 57%. So just think about that for a minute. So in 2007, almost 3/4 of the people around us, if you asked them what do they believe, what's your faith, what's your background, would say, "I'm a Christian, I go to a church, I'm part of a community." And then in 8 years, that dropped down 15% to 57%. That might be a little faster than around here. Is that safe to say? What do you think that would be in Cole Camp or Sedalia or wherever you might have come in from? If you walked out on the street and asked 10 people, how many would say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I go to this church"? What do you think? I don't know that. You have to answer this now.
Probably about
8 out of 80% maybe? That sounds about right. That's what Ohio's like, I think. So Massachusetts, it's sort of, I don't know, a little farther ahead, I guess, in this weird decline that we're seeing sort of all around. I mean, who has ever felt like there are fewer people in the pews now than there used to be? Anyone ever noticed or observed or thought that before? 3 people? 4 or 5? Okay. Right? I mean, we just get it. We know. If we're grandparents, we don't see our grandkids as involved or engaged or attending or participating in stuff, right? Parents, maybe the same way. It's hard to see a lot of other families and kids. I mean, we just know what this looks like, and this is what it feels like where we are. Mississippi, maybe a little closer to the Midwest in this area, so from 92% to 80%. But think about that. That's almost a whole percent every single year. And where does this go in 8 more years? What does the church look like? And what does that mean for our job to love God and love others? All right. So this is why we showed up on the scene. No one? Really? I thought that it usually gets a reaction or something. You guys are very polite. You're so polite. This is our puppy. His name is Graham. The only reason he's on the screen is that we have mostly photos of our puppy and nothing else. So I had to figure out how to use him as illustrations for all this stuff. No, so here's what happened. We have one coffee place in town. It happens to be a Starbucks. You know, it is what it is. In 2009, I graduated seminary where these guys went to school, or Kim went to school, at Trinity Lutheran Seminary. And we all went out to do our first calls, and my first call was in Boston. I thought it was Boston. It's not actually Boston, so we're in this little town called Marshfield, and it's 20 miles south of the city, which takes 2 hours on a good day to commute into. And we have the largest agricultural fair in the state of Massachusetts every single year in our town. Huge 4-H. It's really rural. It feels a lot like home, but it's also really suburban, and people commute, and they do the city thing, and they do that. And in a lot of ways, we're urban. I mean, we're part of the city and have all of the things that sort of surround that all around us, too. And it's just a really odd little town. And the ELCA, the Lutheran Church, said, we should start a new church here. Now, how old is Cole Camp? Stephen hasn't taken me to the museum yet. I keep asking. 175? All right, so Marshfield is 375 years old. This year, we just played their birthday party. And the thing with the town that's 375 years old, especially out in New England, is that there's no more land to build on, right? There's nothing new that can possibly happen. In fact, everything is just sort of, I don't know, it's just older. It just feels older, right? Everything is just a little less developed. And so here we come into this place where no new people are moving in. Everything is super expensive. Nothing new has happened in 150 years. And they said, start a church. Sure, right? No people, no money, no building. Thank you for all of your offering and mission support. Did you know you do this? I don't. Maybe I shouldn't let the cat out of the bag. I don't know. Our ELCA churches, all of us, we all share a portion of our offering. We tithe or we give a percentage of what we gather and use to support this community to the church, right? I'm the church. I'm where some of those things go. Sarah is where some of those things go. We in Marshfield are where some of that mission support from congregations all across the country has gone to start new congregations. And so we are looking at all of our history and heritage and shrinking and thinking about where the church is headed, but we're also starting new churches. That's what we do as church, right? What are we supposed to do? Love God and love others. The easiest way to do it is to go to places we've never been before. The closest to Lutheran churches to us are about 20 miles away in either direction. I don't think that's quite true around here. We could find, right? The town that Kim and I went to college in had 18 Lutheran churches when we started school for a town of 50,000 people, right? And so we are going to places where we haven't been before. Now here's the challenge that we ran into right away. So you have no people and you have no money and you have no building and you're supposed to start a church. Thank you, Kim. Right? I mean, what do you do? And so I lived in a Starbucks for a year. Not like slept on the floor at a condo, but you know what I mean. Because I had nowhere else to go. There was no office to sit in, right? There was no place where we did ministry. And so I sat around and just met people and talked with people. Like we all sit around and meet people and talk with people. My town had a coffee place, breakfast place, where everybody who had to get up at 4 a.m. got up and went and had their cup of coffee and like talked about the weather and then went to work. Do you have that here? You do that same kind of thing, right? And in Marshfield, all right, we're sort of like yuppies and out east, right? But it's Starbucks. But that is the place that people gather and they sit. It's the only place that they can do that in. And so I sat around Starbucks for a year, and the whole question for us was how do we love God and love others? And what does it look like? And I don't know if this is true for you, but this was true for us. A lot of people have not had positive church experiences where we are. A lot of people just have never experienced this kind of loving community, gathering together to do good stuff, right? I mean, they just hadn't had a chance to see what that feels like, to see something positive come out of a group like this gathering together and sharing their faith. And so the first thing that we wrapped our heads around was the need to create sacred space. Now, why are we doing all this? Remember that, because I'm going to scare you in a minute with that one. But the first need was to create sacred space. And then the second one was to connect people to God. I mean, how many of us could, find a certain book in the Bible or share different things that we've learned or accumulated or sort of know from confirmation or from being part of a church, right? But struggle when someone says, so why are you a Christian? Does anybody want to answer that? We have like a quick, well. Anybody? Well, my parents were, I guess. I was born in the U.S. in the 21st century, right? And so the next thing we had to do was figure out how to answer that question. I mean, why faith? Why church? Why do we do this? Why are we here? And then lastly was to realize that we are here to love God, and if you only do one of those, we're missing half of it, right? If we get together and we love God every week, and we love our God community, and we participate in our church, and then we go back out and do church again next Sunday, right? We're missing something, right? And so many people where we are had never experienced faith that moves out into the world on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, right? I mean, God and church and that connection that actually responds to what God is doing in this world, of caring for people who need a helping hand, right? Of seeing all of the beauty and the goodness and pointing it out to people when we're not just in Sunday and thinking about it. And so that was the third thing that we were about, was to create sacred space and connect to God and respond to God's love. And here's where I start freaking people out. So the next thing we did was figure out how do we get help and find partners. What would it look like if every church in Cole Camp decided just to all go together and pool your resources and worship together and be church together. Anyone freaking out right now? And like, we can't do that. Not with them. We're over there, right? And there are lots of good reasons, and we have lots of history, and we all have different takes on Scripture and the Bible and different ways of understanding who we are. But there are also a lot of people around us that God has placed to help us in that work, right? Partnership is not a dirty word. It's a beautiful thing. I heard a little bit about the fair, and I know that sometimes it seems like everyone has their own booth and does their own thing, but in the end of the day, right, you're connected and coordinate and talk and are supporting good things in the same place, right? And so we stumbled across the Methodists. No one shuddered. That was good, right? Does anybody know and love a Methodist? Anybody? All right, good, perfect. Anybody used to be a Methodist? Maybe you can. All right, so you get this. In 2008, the Methodists and the ELCA, the UMC and the ELCA, signed a bunch of documents after years and years of talking way too much in little tiny hotel conference rooms that say we're the same. I mean, all the little differences that we have, all the things that we fought about or needed to define separately overall, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. We are God's church, and God has called us to love God and love others. And let us not let all of our history and heritage get in the way. Let it support us in doing that out in the world. Now that's nice. What that meant in New England was that Methodists and Lutherans could go to the food pantry and serve like once every 6 months together, right? Or you could do like a youth lock-in together once a year. So here's what was happening in Marshfield. This was Marshfield United Methodist Church. In 2009, they had 10 members. Some people said, oh, only 10 members. No, they were also like the 10 members that hated each other and only hadn't left because they were so determined to win the fight that they were going to stay there until the last. It's like the touch a truck thing. Have you ever seen a touch a truck, right? So it's like a radio contest they do once in a while, and they put a big truck out there and everyone puts their hand on it, and the last person to still have their hand on the truck wins the truck, right? This was Marshfield United Methodist Church. They were waiting. Everyone was just touching it, like just waiting for everybody else to either drop dead or leave or get frustrated or fed up, right? Now that makes for a healthy faith community, right? That's going to help us to love God and love others. And it was sad in so many ways. It was just sad. It was a church that was divorced from what God was calling the church to be. And yet here we had the Lutherans, through all of your support and prayers and help, saying we need to start a new church. We had God sitting here in this place saying we have a church building with members that are dwindling and leaving and no longer a part of this place. We have a partnership and a community that's growing and doing something new together. Work together. Now, what do you think the ELCA and the UMC said when we said, well, we think God's calling us to join together and to do a new church together? No, keep guessing. What do you think they said? Oh, wait, no, wait, keep going. That wasn't the plan. That's all we said. Not that it wouldn't work, not that it wasn't a good idea, not that we couldn't do it. That wasn't the plan. As if that was shutting a door, right? I mean, there's something in the back of our minds that has a plan. We know how this should go. We know how we want it to look. And it's challenging when God says, that's not how this is going to work, right? And our initial reaction often is to God, that wasn't the plan. But why are we here? Love God and love others. And where we live, I was telling Kim and Stephen earlier, just to like see the shock on their faces. Right, we have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. Many of you might have a house similar, smaller, bigger. $450,000 in Marshfield, Massachusetts. Right? Yeah, that's on a half acre. Yep. Yeah. So imagine trying to start a church and buy property, and right? I mean, just crazy. And here God was saying to this place, work together. Figure out how to create sacred space and connect to God and respond to this world using all of the gifts and assets and people that I have put in this place. And the beauty of Methodists is that from on high, they can kick people out of churches. Everyone should laugh at that. I don't know, a few people are a little too serious. No, I mean, once in a while, it is good, and we all know this, to say, this has run its course. And you guys need to go and find a way to be church somewhere else, to be fed somewhere else, to allow God to do a new thing in this place. Have you ever had that plant that you loved so much that you kept watering even though the leaves were all brown and wilted and just dead as a doornail, right? And we keep thinking maybe someday it's going to revive from the roots, but it ain't. And God in this place said, this is done. And the Methodists were able to say, you know what, we're going to close our doors, and in 6 months we're going to open them up again with the Lutherans, with people from all sorts of denominations and backgrounds, and say, what are we doing here to love God and love other people? All right, this is how we wandered into this place. And so we tore the sign down. You want controversy in a small town, right? Change a sign. And we're on the main drag that goes through town. And so we put up this reimagining church sign. Lesson number 1, reimagining is not a word. And lesson number 2, no one had any idea what that said. The they couldn't read it, right? So we thought we're going to put up this big, exciting sign, and everyone's going to say, oh, great, I want to drive up to the church that's reimagining what church could look like. No, they had no idea what the sign said. And so we kept trucking and kept moving and kept dreaming. This is where people start to freak out. Why are we here? Love God and love others, and sometimes it doesn't involve pews. I was talking to some people in South Dakota a few months ago, and I got to this slide, and then I talked for another 6 hours that day. It was a big workshop, conferencey thing. Some people, not too many, never got past this slide. This is where they got stuck. So I feel I should offer a little bit of explanation. So in our building, obviously land is expensive, buildings are small, we can't expand, we don't have a lot of money, right, because we're a new church. And so we looked at this big, beautiful worship space that was our biggest and most beautiful, holy space that got used for an hour once a week, and said, we are here to love God and love other people, and we need space to do it. Space that's flexible, space that we can worship in and serve in and connect to people in. And so that meant moving the pews around. Okay, we actually got rid of all of them. I was trying to soften the blow. We tossed our pews out on the front of the church, and within 2 hours, a beautiful Baptist congregation 2 towns away came and picked them all up and said, we've been dying for pews ever since we started. God recycles. All right. So this was our first Christmas. Now, can you imagine Christmas in a nice 70s church with stains on the carpet? I think you can sort of see to the right of the joy. I think it's a blood stain. I don't know how wine could get between the pews and get dropped, right? Really gross, right? Gold 70s carpeting and mysterious stains and nothing that really looks much like church. And we set up cold metal folding chairs, and 15 people showed up, and we had some Christmas cookies, and we sang hymns, and we celebrated the birth of Jesus. There still aren't pews in the room, right? Sometimes God stretches and pushes us to all sorts of places, and this is where we ended up by Lent. So this is how our space came together for Easter. Again, it's still this big sort of flexible 70s kind of building, but we had a lot of people with a lot of heart and a lot of time. We did all this work ourselves. I'm sure you guys are familiar, right? We had no money, so what do you do when you rip up the carpet and you have a concrete floor? We just stain it and seal it and make it look good, right? And we still worship in the space. And we have a lot more people, and we have a bigger budget, and we have more space to sort of play and do things like that. And we keep this because it reminds us of who we are, of what God needs us to do. Love God and love others and not get too caught up on the furniture, right? To realize that there is so much that we can do when we open our space, our minds up to see what God is doing. And so in this room, I got this. Okay. So we worship. This is also a big labyrinth that we put up for Lent, so people could come in and reflect. I don't know what your lives are like. I can maybe imagine at certain seasons of the year, you're up before dawn and you go to sleep when you can't move anymore, right? Or there's just busyness. I mean, just to go into town and to get the stuff that you need and pick up the kids and do whatever, right? You're just moving. And we are on a road that never stops. People just keep flying by again and again and again. And so we made space for people to stop in that space. And after that, we realized that there are a lot of people in our town, that's a small town, everybody knows everybody, that don't have enough to eat. But it's a small town, and everybody knows everybody. And so I'm not going to tell you that I don't have enough to eat. You're my neighbor. I don't want you to know that, right? I mean, people in need who couldn't feed their kids, who stretched and scrimped and still couldn't quite make it to that next spot. But no one knew, because we're fairly well-to-do, and everyone wants to keep up appearances, right? And we're supposed to love God and love others, but meanwhile, some of us are just trying to survive. And so we got connected to a person that does this meal packaging program. Have you ever heard of meal packaging? Have you ever done that around here? I know it's big, like in Minnesota, if they keep going up north. Basically, you take a bunch of raw ingredients, right? You gather up beans and rice and soy and all those things, and you package them together into these little packets that you heat seal, and they have a 2-year shelf life, and they're usually consumed within a week. And we've so far packaged 280,000 meals out of our little spot. Now, how does a new church package 280,000 meals? And a lot of money, and a lot of time. We're a new church, right? We worship maybe 120 on a really good Sunday right now. So who do you need? Everybody. Everybody. You need the 4-H club, and you need the Lions Club, and you need other churches, and you need the schools, right? I mean, you need everybody. And so this was a big part of our how do we respond to what God is doing in this place. I mean, to realize that it is not about us, it's not about the program that Sanctuary can put together, right? It's about us being the catalyst in a place that usually just does things the same way, and every group has their own project that they do, to say, we need everybody, this is too important. And God doesn't want us to sit around while people are going hungry and can't even admit it or talk about it, right? Let us all work together. And so 280,000 meals, all of that money, all of those volunteers, all of that time has come from all over the community. We're still small. We're probably the smallest contributor to this whole project. But Sanctuary as a place, through your support, through all of our connections together as church, has been able to cut through all the stuff that says, well, yeah, but the Methodist church does the food program, and the Congregational church does the Thanksgiving dinner, and people are still hungry. All right. This is our ground level coffee house. We just had this last night. How many teenagers do you have hanging out on Friday nights in church? Yeah, us either. I don't know about this area. In our neck of the woods, there's a huge opiate problem. I mean, it starts with prescription painkillers and heroin and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's tragic. We've had, I think in Massachusetts this year, I'm sure it's gone up. As of a month ago, it was 1,200 deaths just this year from overdoses. Everywhere. And it's crazy stories. It's the kid that gets his wisdom teeth out and just starts to spiral, right? I mean, it's just a lack of connection to community and people that notice and are there and can help. In our town, on the weekends, you have very few options and very few things you can do. And so we have been trying to figure out how can we create safe, sacred space? How can we connect people to God? Maybe not through a worship service, but through space where they are cared for and loved and can feel free to be themselves. So we started doing this coffee house. And that's developed into this group of, like everybody, right? Teenagers and baby boomers and little kids and, the James Taylor cover bands, right? I mean, just all sorts of random people that come together. And we had a mom last month that came up to Sarah and I, and she said, where else on a Friday night can my 15-year-old son and I be together and happy? And it's a church. Right? I mean, it was just like this weird moment for all of us. Like all of it, just all started to click. We all started to realize what was actually happening. And there's still a lot of kids in town, and there's still a lot of need, and there's still a lot of things, but that kind of space was possible. This is not a direct correlation, because we moved all the pews. Anyone else still like, stop talking about pews, right? You have plenty of room. I'm not talking about these. We, in our place, had to ask ourselves again and again and again, what does it mean to love God and love others? And it didn't mean another worship service. I mean, in this place, in this space, it meant dragging in tables. Starbucks actually gave us their whole old store. They were modeled with a big granite coffee bar and lots of little round tables now, and just making this into a coffee shop where God needs to be present in a coffee shop, and that's not going to be the one down the road, right? And so our place, this place that we're in, just keeps sort of evolving and turning into new and unexpected things. This was day camp this last year. We have picked up the fine tradition. You guys do Bible school, vacation Bible school? We also have lots of vacation Bible schools in our area. The Catholic Church in New England is huge. 98% of people in our area grew up, used to be, are lapsed, former, angry Catholics. And the Catholic parishes in our town have between 2,000 and 4,000 members each. There's 3 of them. They did vacation Bible school this year, and they had 18 kids show up. Do the math. What is that? 8,000 people plus, right? 18 kids. Vacation I can get behind. Bible, okay, wait, what? What is that? And then school, right? So we call this day camp. It's the same thing. But we call it day camp, and we go for 6 hours because in our neck of the woods, people are working. And if you have kids, you can't do a program with them for 2 hours because I got to be at work for 6 or 8, and I don't have child care or someone to come in at 11 and pick them up. Right? I mean, it's just a challenge in our space. And so what we said was we need to do camp all day long. Imagine doing vacation Bible school from 9 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. Anyone want to sign up and volunteer right now? I mean, you can't do it, and we're small, and that's sort of crazy. And so here's what's happened. There are all sorts of amazing and incredible people in our town that do neat stuff. And we have beekeepers and people that raise chickens, and we have the South Shore Science Center and the Museum of Science, and there's all sorts of really cool and interesting things going on. And we just gather them all together in one place all afternoon. And so we do vacation Bible school, we do our program that we do as church in the morning, and then all afternoon connect them to all sorts of stuff right in their neighborhood, in their town, where God is doing cool things, where we can learn more about creation, or we can see how all that we're doing in school around science and engineering and math connects into all the gifts that God has given us to create and be and do stuff in this world. Right? And so this was probably my favorite activity from the summer. If you've never heard 100 kids all playing djembes in a giant live room all together, you've never lived. A djembe is a drum, and this was a giant drum circle, and so this guy had all of the kids in a big circle drumming together. It was a little scary at first, but then it was the coolest thing to see all of that sync and gel and come together in this place that we have made space for it to happen. So this was day camp this year. We had over 100 kids. This is our 3rd year that we've done camp. And the cool part is that we have 100 kids, but we also have 40 adults that are in and out and volunteering and doing stuff. Because why are we here? Love God and love others. And sometimes it's easier to do that if we all get together in the same room, right? And we all have so many gifts. We all have so many things to share, and so people float in and out, and just all sorts of stuff has bubbled up from that. I won't point out that there weren't any pews in that picture. And then it's just because we don't have a really beautiful, awesome fellowship space. It should, when everyone's like, who was that guy that you brought in that said we should? This is our altar. I would ask, does anybody know when your altar was carved, installed, and somebody? So we're new, so if we were going to start like they would start in the 1870s, right, where do you start from? Well, imagine the craftspeople and the skills and all the local people that put heart and time and talent into a place like this. And I've seen current time and talent and heart put into a place like this. And this was really important to us as we figured out what our liturgical furniture would look like and how we are being church. How can we participate in making the space together? It turns out that meant using pallets for our altar. We have a flexible space, right? And so this was good for us because we were able to both reflect who we are, but also move things around and be a little flexible in that. And so this was a wedding we did last October. And they're pallets. Right? Anybody use pallets in your work day to day? Right? They're dirty and they're ugly and they're not necessarily something that we think of putting in the front of our sanctuary, right? But for us in this place, what God was telling us to do was to get rid of all the preconceived notions and the things that people might get hung up on, and to say that church is just as real as everything you do at work day to day, of all the dirty stuff that we might have sitting in our garage or out in the backyard, that God too makes that beautiful and does something new out of it. And that is why we have a pallet altar in our space.